Hey, folks, I am Rebecca, blonde in the belly of the beast. Today, I have Arthur Kwon Lee, who I've only recently discovered because something about the Twitter algorithm recognized that I'm trying to collect the accounts of based Asians. So after I I got totally obsessed with Diane Yap, I started seeing your tweets, and I was like, this guy is not fucking around. And so I immediately decided to get you on the show. You're an artist. Why don't you start with a little bit about your red pill journey, and then I've got some questions about art, race. We're gonna cover the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks for having me. I appreciate that, Rebecca. So my whole background, I'm a working artist. So the way I make my living is I'm a practicing painter. That's the first thing. So I come from the New York City art world, and that's where I had most of my success in the traditional sphere. And the way I woke up, people say how you got red pilled. I call it black pilled. But
Yeah.
the way I got black pilled was I got into art because I come from like a very traditional Christian household, which has their own sides, I understand. But I grew up as a Christian. My father's a pastor. My mother's a composer. I grew up around the arts, and this is just I was brought up under aesthetic tutelage essentially. And when I was studying all of this art history, I fell in love with Christian art because the greatest masterpieces and artists were always these Christian artists. And that's kind of why I got into art. And that was sort of my first love. I kind of had this cheat code when I was a kid. Like I fell in love with beauty before even like the chasing of sexual carnal pleasure, which is a really weird cheat code that most people have no idea. It's unfathomable to most people. But I sort of caught that imprint. So I was like, this is the way, right? So I became an artist. I was obsessed with this. Went to art school. Did the whole struggling artist thing in DC for some time. Then I went to New York City because I was invited to this residency program. I won Artist of the Year in 2020 from the Eileen Kaminsky Foundation. That gave me a lot of clout. I started to hobnob with the right people, nepotism, hanging out at the Jane Hotel rooftop bar in Norwood on Thursdays, all these like little circles, and that was cool. Getting art exhibitions in like Lower East Side, Midtown, like every couple months. So I was like really doing well in that sphere until I started to touch upon a higher tier. I started to get my foot in this upper echelon of the art world, and they were really much they were offended when I was leaning towards biblical imagery. And that's when I was like, what is going on? And this is before I was like politically cognizant. I was just like,
Right, right.
okay. And Rebecca, I'm like keeping up with the Joneses, and a lot of people can understand the concept of social camouflage. I'm like blending in because I don't want to lose my position. So I was like, okay, here's what I'll do. I realized that they were okay with the intellectual dark web Christianity. Like I can sort of play with concepts pointing towards a cross or that sort of logic idea. But if I painted something like obliquely Christian, they didn't like it. So I basically did that for like 2, 3 years in New York. Like I'm like, let me play with this language. And that was good for me too, like in a mainstream way. And eventually I said, you know what? These people are very degenerate and self-obsessed, and like you're hanging with these people every week, going to pizza spots with them, sushi, all these things, and they're just like so rude to the wait staff. They're definitely the pretentious New York City like art elitist crowd. I'm like, oh, I'm not these kind of people at all. So I said,
Mhm.
I built enough clout, I got enough of a following, like on my Instagram at that point, and I said, let me just do my own thing. So I started to paint Christian imagery, and all the galleries were just like, we're not into you. You got to stop this. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to double down. Fuck you all. I'm going to exhibit this as well. And then push came to shove, and I got blacklisted.
Mhm.
And it was crazy because I got blacklisted 6 months after winning Artist of the Year. So that's sort of the long story short version of my career in the New York City art world. Now I'm an independent artist, and I pretty much focus on selling to the base elite. So the base people who have money, they pretty much buy my art now. Because why would they buy art from people that hate them, right? And I'm
Right.
also way better than them. Like technically, like my paintings are more fire. So that's how I make my money.
And I've linked your website below if you guys want to check them out. But we've seen a decline in beauty in every arena, but outside of the degradation of the modern female body, which I think is probably the worst one, it's most obvious in the art world. So when do you think this started. I think it was around the Duchamp Matisse era that things really deteriorated, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, we all know it's the Jews. And so, well, you have to understand that the whole conception, if you look at before this idea of postmodern art, and I'm not trying to sound like this Jordan Peterson sort of thing, but what he is correct about is art universities was a new conception. If you look at art training before the Frankfurt School, it was like atelier-based schools. Mm-hmm. So art basically studying under like the tutelage of they're an apprentice and I'm studying under a master, right? So it's kind of like a trade school. Like you go into anything like plumbing or carpentry, you need to learn these skill sets so you need to learn the rules to break the rules, right? You need to know formalism, color theory, compositional awareness, aesthetics, all these concepts, and develop the hand skills, create your own voice, go into the market, right? That's basically how it works. But art universities today are just these assembly line to create these social activists. That's why all of these people who live in blue states, who might be too mean, you go into these galleries and you see this hogwash on the wall. Like, what the fuck am I looking at? You know, you see some like splatter on the wall. How was this valued as art? Well, art has transitioned, literally, like it's like a sexual transition from, you know, artists are supposed to be spiritual servants. I look at myself as a servant. People don't know that. Like, I'm here to revitalize Christian art. That's my role. But they've transitioned to like these spreaders of degeneracy and narcissism. And with that a collapse. And that's why the art is no longer about actual aesthetics and beauty and art that should point upwards, right? Something that's cohesive. It's become this field of relativity. And the reason is because the atelier system has been pushed out and they've taken over all the cultural institutions, including the art education system. So all art universities, the substrate is based on John Murphy. He wrote this paper called Art and the Social World, and he's from the Frankfurt School. And, you know, he was in Columbia with all these other Jews, and their goal was to basically spread and proliferate art education so they can steal the whole creative class. Because artists are the ones who really can communicate with the youth, right? So they're very wise to do that. So the reason why all the art is dog shit today is because it's Talmudically based. And all you have to do is read the Talmud, and you go, wow, this is all about moral relativism. So if it's moral relativism, of course, it's going to also reflect into the external world with aesthetic relativity rather than objective standards, which is what beauty actually was. So that's sort of the context of this soup that we're in today, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I heard you say that beauty in art is the sacred, and as our society implodes, we spread vanity instead of spreading beauty. Like you said something really profound. Like with hip hop, you said pseudo masculinity as a compensation for the absence of a benevolent father. What other ways do you think that secularism has contributed to the destruction of art?
Well, it's beyond even secularism now. It's now like Satanism at this point.
It totally, yeah. I went and I saw the David. I think it's in Florence. I don't know. I was a teenager. And right across from the David was this modern art, but hyper realistic painting of like Satan fully erect. And it's right across from the David. I was like, this is the juxtaposition was, it was obviously to insult people that were going for, you know, to view the divinity. And I found it so offensive. And that was one of the things that really led me down this path of being like, this is an assault on God. That's what this is.
Absolutely. This is why when you look at all the biggest mainstream celebrities and stars, whether you're looking at Sam Smith or what's his name, Little Nas X or Madonna, the reason why they do all these demonic projections, it's funny because the art world is like a very exclusive thing today when it shouldn't be, but it's been designed that way in modernity. But all of these people actually, they venerate, you know, celebrities have their celebrities, and it's not really based on the social media sphere or clout. It's like an inner circle thing. And I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but there's a woman in the fine arts theory by the name of Abramovich, and she's literally a Satanist witch. And like she's the one who's curating a lot of this on their behalf, and most people don't even know this. And she's the one who gets world tours and all these crazy exhibitions in the fine art world. It's pretty crazy, and you know, it's sort of a way of unapologetically, just shamelessly saying, "Look, we own you. You know, we rule the world," and that's why it's reflective of that Olympic ceremony we just saw, right? They're literally just being blasphemous and putting down ISIS, I believe, with this dysgenic blue Indian man. And why would they do that? It's because it's a middle finger to the cross. It's a middle finger for those who believe in God and want to restore order. And this is why I left the art world, because it's just like a totally satanic, inverted landscape today. And yeah, I'm trying to bring back beauty in conjunction to being this weird, strange, cultural-based Asian guy. I'm a weird animal, let's be honest. Yeah.
The live chat's bitching. Would you mind scooting closer to your mic?
Yeah.
Everyone's like blah 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 blah. It's hard to hear Arthur. Okay, I hear you guys. I see you. I see you. I hear you. No, it's totally fine. I'm pretty concerned about the future of art, because I see some people trying to return to the master skill set and everything like that. But then I'm seeing AI, and I'm like, how is this going to be a further destruction? And then I do hyper realism, and I'm starting to think that this is not a valid way to express yourself artistically because of AI, because of cameras and things like that. So how do you think AI is going to contribute to the future of art?
So I'm going to go to the past to answer this. There's a gentleman by the name of Marshall McLuhan, and he wrote The Medium is a Message. And essentially, he predicted the internet before it came up, right? This is going to relate. I'm not doing some random Chinese thing.
Oh, no, it's okay. Do what you
want. But yeah, basically, there's an art critic, Jewish guy, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, who was responding to McLuhan's writing. And he basically talked about how, before the advent of photography, painting were the photographers. So it was our job to capture people or render reality, right? Right. And then this industrial revolution comes into the picture. And now, let's say there's some 16-year-old kid who has an iPhone camera versus my skill set as a painter. And we need to capture this right here, right? This chin bottom. Who's going to win in capturing it realistically? He's going to win every single time, of course. Mm-hmm. So what happened is that it basically changed the medium specificity. So painting changed into still capturing and rendering with this hand ability, but it's a sort of different vibration. It's become a different thing. And I believe every time there's a new medium, people always panic, but all it does is sort of create more medium specificity. So this is my prediction, just because I've been looking at the evolution of mediums, and I've just noticed that over and over again. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe AI will just be a flood that I can't, fight, and that'll be the end of it, and I'll just say peace. But I think what's going to happen is analog is going to be its own domain, So, or maybe I'm hopeful. but there's people who just like real life art as well, and until we get to the point where they can 3D print beautifully made paintings, which is probably going to happen eventually, I'll still be relevant.
But there's a soul that's imparted in art done by humans. I think that's the point. So there is going to be more necessity for the spirit, the human spirit, to develop in artistry, which I think is maybe that will be a positive development. Hey, that's not black pilled at all. That's a white pill you just delivered.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm black pilled. I guess I'm white pilled as well. I'm a mess.
No, it's okay. Everybody goes through this journey where they're angry, and then they're black pilled, and then they're like, okay, well, what do we do now? And I get this commentary from people all the time.
All these pills. You know what I think it is? I think I'm in regards to the sexual market, because this is something that people keep talking about. I'm pretty black pill, but I don't mean that in a doomer sense. I mean literally, they literally have different categories that men look at the world from. There's the blue pill, red pill, black, and then I'm more black pill in that regard. I think that the blue and red is cool, but I would say my attitude is, there's no point of being a negative person. So that's, I'm not a negative person. I'm actually a very happy person, but I'm black pill about the information, Rebecca.
Yeah. No, I understand. I heard you talk a little bit about your racial red pill journey. You you made a really funny response video about rooftop Koreans earlier in the week. You guys should check that out. It was funny. It was a good watch. But how did the Stop Asian Hate movement kind of catapult you into this realm of race realism?
Well, I was in New York when this was happening, right? There's all these little old Asian women in Queens getting knocked out by these, you know, dark skinned people. And you know, it is what it is, right? And constantly I kept seeing, I was going to my gym and I kept seeing like all these news reports like white supremacy is causing so much trouble with the Asian community. And as they're showing that, there's a blurry ass, like very blurry footage to the point where you can't really see what's going on, which is why they selected it. This black guy just like striking a woman in the face. And I'm like, yeah, that's a black person.
Yeah, let's be real. Yeah.
And then for me, it was just, it's funny because I shared the story. There's one gallery in the Lower East Side. I'm not going to name any of these galleries, by the way, because they're already finding any reason to try to like beat legal on me. So if I keep it vague, then I'll be okay. I got to use Jewish tactics sometimes. But there was one gallery that I was working with. I was one of 8 artists at that time. We're at this wood fire pizza place. And, you know, she's like, look, it's Stop Asian Hate Month is coming up. We should have you do a show with one of our artists. She's a BLM advocate. And then I remember I said, so blacks assaulting Asians and targeting them based on race is white supremacy.
Ooh.
and then it just goes to show you that well, first of all, New York City is such a lost. I mean, they're in like a social post-apocalyptic world, and it's all about fitting the narrative. But that was just showing me that, you know, yeah, they want to keep the Asians brainwashed, but there's a potentiality of like they don't want to see that. You know, I'm not even trying to create an Asian white alliance, but we are like the high IQ races.
An alliance seems natural at this point.
Yeah, we're not fighting each other. Like we're just
right.
not. Like, you know,
also generally, you know, Asians don't want to take government handouts. There's a responsibility within the community to not do that and to self-preserve. And so just based on those things, I'm like, Asian alliance now. Only Koreans, Japanese, and Chinese, though. That's it.
No. Here's what I'll say. I don't really fuck with the Chinese. I would say for the white countries, if you want to accept also a smaller percentage of outside races, you should only, and this is only if you want to in the first place, you should only really consider Koreans and Japanese, and then the rest is like they're gonna have to really show what they contribute. You know, like because I mean the coercion plan is in full effect, and I was looking at the UK. You know what I'm saying? There is definitely a browning going on, and we are the only ones more pale than you guys. So,
well, how do you think the Great Replacement is affecting Asian communities in America?
Well,
and abroad.
Well, I mean, it's starting to happen. I'm sorry to keep cutting you off, by the way.
Oh no, it's okay.
Toxically masculine. There's all of this. Like just last week, there was all these school children in this assembly holding the Israeli flags in Japan. So the Tengu are trying to infiltrate East Asia as well. And it's funny because people don't know, but the Jews tried to infiltrate Japan like centuries ago, and the samurai casted them out. So there's a meme called "The Jews Fear the Samurai." Well, hopefully you guys can get some inspiration from that. You know, I mean, speaking of this this is actually valid to what's going on in the UK right now, because this Muslim migrant crisis has been happening for like 30 years, like even beyond. For how long? You know, it's been a while, and it's an uncomfortable truth. But again, I know that they want the Muslims and Christians to fight, but I'm not trying to fall for that psyop. But at the same time, there are cultures that are not assimilatable. I mean, again, I'm trying to be reasonable here, but I remember when there was this giant gathering of all these different ambassadors of different countries, and Japan stood up. You know, they had 2 of each country, and then the guy goes, "Yeah, as long as the Muslim population doesn't go beyond 2.5%, they're statistically irrelevant, so we don't care." And then all the white countries are like, how dare they say such things? You know what? They don't give a fuck because they're gonna go back to Japan where the social cohesion is so strong. He's gonna go back to his condo. He's gonna see his wife and his kids, and he's not gonna care because he's in a that's cohesive.
Yes.
But you see what I'm saying? We don't have white guilt. So this is something that well, actually, it's not even a white guilt. It's not a defect. It's more of a Jewish brainwashing program that I don't really blame white people because you guys have had an onslaught of anti-white rhetoric for how many generations? I don't even blame you guys because we haven't dealt with that. So that's why I can speak willy-nilly like this. But the reality is it's not right, and this is why when you look at Japanese and Koreans in particular, they're they want to stay there, but they're looking at America and going, oh, I put out this meme which is perfect for this. I gotta pull this back up after this talk. There's this picture, there's a TV, and then the TV it says Jews versus white people, and there's an alien sitting down with his remote on the couch, and it says Asians, and his speech bubble says, I hope whites win.
That's so accurate. Yeah.
There's something like that going on. It's crazy. If you look at the global approval rating of Trump, for example, and I know Trump is still Israeli owned right now, but the point is he still represents a white identity as a white figure, right? A white man as a figure. It's unapologetic. He still represents that because that's what he is. So the approval rating, globally, one of the highest isn't even white countries. It's Japan. They sell out in Trump hats, and they're like, what the fuck is going on? It's because they understand the concept, right? So that's sort of going on. So I think at an intellectual level, there's crossover, and there's alliances that can be made. But again, I'm not trying to say, hey, I'm not trying to do a yellow to white Kalergi plan. I'm just saying that be careful about what allies you accept. Make sure that they're not bringing in hostility. Make sure they respect your culture and your morals and your religious values as well. And if they don't, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that we've been afflicted with this disease of just excessive individuality, or at least the perception of individuality. I don't think that most people are really individuals. But when I went to Japan, it was like everybody did their own thing, but also even the person sweeping the street was acutely aware that they were part of a larger collective, a cohesive collective. And that's what made society function. And part of that is, what we would perceive as, well, not me, but what Americans would perceive as racist. I saw this Japanese chef just kick out a bunch of Chinese people in an empty restaurant. And he's like, we're full. He's like, get out. I don't even know how it happened, how he recognized that they were Chinese. They were speaking English, but he was like, sorry, and we need some of that. We need some of that. I don't care if people are going to perceive me as racist. This is our country. This is how things operate. And this is why I admire many Asians, because they have that. Japan was the first country that I went to where I didn't want to live in Japan as a white person. I wanted to be Japanese. And it made me so sad, because I was like, I wish we had that in America. We used to have a white consciousness. We used to have a sense of communal cohesion. We used to have a high trust society. And I've never really experienced that until I went to Japan.
It's so funny because a couple things, because you touched upon a lot. The first thing is that shame is not a negative thing.
Of course not, right?
Well, shame is a double-edged sword. I understand, you don't want to be too callous on young people because that can be hard for them. I of course there's tact, but I would say overall there is a role for shame, right? Obviously you want to be benevolent, you want to be a loving society. You're not trying to say, look at you, go in the corner, let me shove you in the locker. I'm not saying
we need a little bit of that, though.
We need a little bit of that. Yeah, sure. But I think the value of East Asia, there's a saying that if there's a nail sticking out, hammer it back in. Now that's a double-edged sword, because obviously what that means for people, the creative people, are the ones who really stand out. They can be targeted, sure. We go too far with that sometimes, so everyone only looks at the positive of a culture, of course. We can go too far with that, but shame is really useful. They don't have words like fat shaming in Asia. They don't.
It doesn't even exist, yeah.
No, it doesn't even exist. And it's funny because my cousin was telling me, I didn't know this, by the way. He red pilled me even further on this notion of shame. He's like, yeah, for job interviews, it's perfectly acceptable if somebody's sitting across you and you're trying to hire them to say, for our optics, you need to lose weight, and we can make back around. Yeah,
That's awesome.
I don't see that happening in the West,
Mm-hmm.
and it's too bad because you know I mean, let's be honest. Like the West deserves so much, and we're sort of burning ourselves by, we're afraid to offend, the ugliest of us. It's the uglocracy, and it's the degenic people who just want to pull everyone down. It is kind of that. I hate to say it, and also I gotta also say it's like people are like, what is like the number one thing people end up calling me is like a Asian trader, and you want to be white. I'm like, I don't want to be white. I love being Asian. It's more so that I understand that everyone deserves to have consciousness of their race. I don't see the big deal. And it's funny because like I'm saying this as a person. Most of my family is in Korea. I live in a white country, but I go to Korea like, oh, not every summer, but often enough to see my family, and they're very much aware of that. Like they literally say things like, yeah, you can, like race mixing is okay as long as it's a certain percentage. Like we don't mind, but we don't want to cross that amount. And they can just say that openly. Like you can hear that at like any local bar amongst like young and old people. Who cares? I feel like if I say that openly, I need to worry about some Karen or I don't know, like something. You know what I mean? Here, it's a little bit. The language policing has gotten really out of hand because the anti-Christian sewer dwellers. So this is kind of where we're at,
Yeah. Do you think that it's easier for Asians to deal with the JQ? That's another thing. I think that there's a white Asian alliance brewing because Asians don't have this generational indoctrination. And I've noticed, I think I read that there were like a few thousand Jews in China. If that's it, like a few thousand. And I think that this, yeah, I know. But I think that this Holocaust indoctrination does not work on them. They're like, "Oh, you got genocided. We've been genocided like a million times." They don't care at all. It's not going to work on them. Do you think that that is why Asians are better with the JQ than white people?
Well, I would say there's a white people are very smart. I mean, the IQ differentiation East Asians are technically like on average smarter, but that's also on a certain type of intelligence.
Uh-huh.
White people are way more inventive in all this. Like all the great geniuses are white as well. And I'm saying this because they're both high IQ. So I think that East Asians, I would just say, socially have an advantage, and all you have to do is look at the political narrative. Because the political narrative in America, there's two things that cast a shadow onto the entire discourse, for at least normies as well. And the first is the Holocaust. We don't have that in Asia, right? We don't have this concern about offending the protected class. We don't even acknowledge them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And secondly is 9/11.
Yeah.
Right? So those are the two largest events that cast a shadow on how we language police ourselves. Before we speak our minds, we always we have this feeling in our gut, and then before it comes out, there's like this Holocaust 9/11 chip that basically filters it. But we don't have that. But the problem with East Asians is that they're genetically very robotic people. So even if they're high IQ, they're very much hive-minded often. So we have our own battles. We have our own social conditioning that we have to fight as well. But we don't have the Holocaust and 9/11 as a dark cloud above us. So that is there's an advantage there in regards to the JQ for sure. But again, East Asians are genetically very they can fall into line. That's another problem though.
But that also is beneficial in many ways.
It can be beneficial. That's true. Again, a lot of double-edged swords here. It can be beneficial, but we got our own fights in our hand in that regard as well, and they are trying to infiltrate. They're definitely so because every day people send me things. They're like, "Oh wow, this school is now having this Jewish celebration holiday." I'm like,
"Ooh,
hi,"
Yeah. I asked Diane Yap, who's Chinese, why I see so many couples, so much Jewish Chinese marital pairing. And she told me that it's just an attraction of high IQ people that are pretty charmless. She's like, the Chinese and the Jews we're just charmless people. And I thought that was really funny because one of the things that I've noticed about Well, you're Korean, so naturally, yeah.
No data. I'm just like, I don't like them.
Yeah, yes, the Koreans and the Japanese as well. But is there a reason? Because when I was in Japan, I noticed that the people were so charming. They were funny, they were charming, and my Korean friends historically have also been the same way. So why do you think that this is absent in the Chinese, present in Korean and Japanese?
Well, the Chinese, I mean, obviously, you look at the type of societies they have. Chinese are communistic, right? But there also are different genetics here, right? Genes are so real. What makes me so black pill is that I always lean towards genetics. Koreans and Japanese are very similar minded, but they're not like you may not be able to tell the facial physiognomy difference, although Asians can from another. But when you talk to them and you look at how they prioritize what they value, like Chinese people are genetically very collectivist. So that's why they're rather charmless. You know, again, there's a balance. You said that our society is focusing too much on individuality. That's also true. But you don't want to be a society that has no individuality.
Right.
That's the problem with a lot of Chinese people. They're like hive-minded people. And China's a big, I mean, there's a lot, I mean, China's like, frankly, it's like multiple different countries in one, actually, if you look at how different they are culturally. But for the most part, they are genetically so similar, which is why they're able to contain all that as one, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that Asians, more specifically Koreans, have a unique ability to tap into their racial consciousness and protect their community? I'm referring to like mostly American Koreans, the rooftop Korean demographic.
The rooftop Korean demographic. Here's the first thing I'll say. One difference between, and again, this is all about IQ, between East Asians and I would say Americans, like white people included, is we like the indicators of what we value for sexual reproduction and creating families is also very different. And I'm not even talking about the philosophical differences or the values. Like I'm saying from a selfish, vain perspective, if you look at, for example, and I'm about to explain a lot of the differences of culture right now with this sentence, like, you know, like you might be like, why the fuck are these girly K-pop guys so like sought after by Asian women? You know, they don't understand these things. It's because East Asians only care about what you can genetically pass down. They don't care about muscle or money or status. I mean, they do, but my point is, physically speaking, they don't, because it's all about you can get more muscle. But what is genetic? You know, I'll use a woman's perspective: a handsome guy who's tall. Mm-hmm. So that's what they prioritize. And in America, there's the masculinity code delusion is pretty much completely programmed, which is why, like, you know, the jacked guy is given all this attention. But East Asians, like most Asian girls, they don't really care about that at all. And they don't understand why, but they don't. It's because all I have to eat is a lot more protein and have like a regular like routine that I can get jacked as well. They don't care about that. They want their children to be pretty. They want their children to be attractive. That's what they want. So we're a very aesthetic people, and our aesthetics are sort of based on what is actually able to be passed down. That's the first thing as to why you said. And by the way, what else can be passed down? That's why you said the Jewish and Chinese people. Well, IQ is also passed down. Mm-hmm. So they look at the income as a representative of the IQ. Actually, that's why you can see really pretty, gorgeous K-pop looking girls. They'll still get with the guy who may not have like the best financial position, but he's so smart and educated, you know, and he's tall and he's like kind of pretty. They're like, okay, in time this will work out, because you know it's like I'm gonna create a better progeny.
Right. Right.
I think there's an honesty there. So when you say, are you able to tap into that? I would say that East Asian people were just, oh man, this is going to sound pretentious. One of our strengths is that we have this predilection towards not being apologetic about like a certain class. But like we're very, like we value that, and we don't hide that we value that. So that's going to imply, you know, that itself is something that we have as a racial people. So there could be consciousness there. I don't even know if I answered your question.
Well, do you think that this multi-generational attraction is is practical and eugenic, or is this a product of organic sexual interest? Like, are these women like, this is a man that I'm attracted to and I'll build a better future? Or is it like, this is a man that I'm going to choose to be attracted to because I know it'll improve our bloodline?
Um, well, this is when I'm gonna get a little bit into the black pill. East Asian countries they recognize the female gaze, and American countries they prioritize the male gaze. And I know this is hard for people to understand, but like, for example, let's say you look at like a bodybuilding show, right? And Americans look at that as like the epitome of health, right? This jacked guy, shaved head with a beard, and then but look at the entire audience; it's all men,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, Asian culture, we look at masculinity based on sigils of like virility, so it is a passed on thing actually, because they like they want men to have hair, for example. You know, like we have this image of like The Rock, Vin Diesel. You know, I'm a barbarian looking guy, but we care more about like virility, like signs of like you know you can prolong your youth, you know that sort of thing. So it's a different set of values, but it is whatever race you're talking about. It is about passing down the genetics and trying to procreate with them. I do believe so personally.
That's true. Yeah, that's why this has been so disrupted in white cultures. This hyper masculinity thing, I don't know a lot of women that are truly into this, and I see this in the manosphere a lot. A lot of this memeing of. Have
We're
you
gonna
seen these?
by the way.
Have you seen these charts with like 1 to 10, and it's, choose the body type that you find most attractive. So all of the men will choose the 10. But women end up in that middle range, that like dad bod with some muscle underneath range typically. And then I'll see Rolo or somebody like that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I see Rolo and these other guys talking about how, women demand this six pack ab guy, but I'm not really seeing it play out.
Well, this is why, like, again, I told you before we started the show, like, I get invited to all these red pill shows because I'm getting conversations going. But then the moment they see my content, they take away the invite because all they have to do is say, look, the way this works is as attraction decreases, transaction increases, which is
Yes.
what the red pill coping is. You know, if there's a guy who's dysgenic, then he needs to compensate for it by saying, I can at least give you security and resource extraction with this money, muscle, status cope. But in actuality, women want good genes the same way men want good genes. And it's actually very simple because just look at nature. This is just the way we are. And it's an uncomfortable truth because it implies a lot of things that can't be changed. That's why it's an uncomfortable truth.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of uncomfortable truths that apply to everyone. That's the reality. And it doesn't, like, who cares? It's still, what does that, it's not subjugating you to know the truth. It just means this is just the information I had and I need to work with the cards that I have. But
Right. And people don't like to look inward. And I'm seeing this development in right wing spheres where genetics is entirely unimportant. I'm baffled by this, but I have a lot of friends on the right that don't believe in genetic disease expression. They think that they can control uh like the bulk of their health through environmental factors. And I try to tell them this is retarded. This is the same mindset of being like, of marrying a black person and then your baby's not Asian and you're confused. It's like, obviously genetics are playing a huge part in who we are as people, in our personalities, in our disease status and things like that. It's not everything. Environment, of course, matters. But I think that we are going the wrong way in this direction.
yeah, I think the like I call the right wing, they're just the left wing today.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Like everyone who calls themselves base, like a lot of people don't know what the fuck that means. Base means race realism, including genetics, means you're sexist and you recognize the JQ. Okay, but it doesn't mean with animosity. It just means you understand the reality, essentially, of the genes of genetics. Because ultimately, it's I put up this poll on my ex, and I was like, okay, is it 100% nurture? Is it 50-50 nature nurture, or is it 100% nature? I'm like an 80-20 guy.
80-20 was what I was going to say. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really give that many options because they can only give you 4 brackets. So I just put it up as 100, 50-50, 100. But the comments overwhelmingly were 70-30, 80-20. So we all know this, you know, to a degree. It's like, it's almost just like, it's common sense at this point, but you know, the dominant narrative doesn't want us to know this, because the moment you recognize race realism and genetics, and the biggest form of segregation that no one also wants to talk about, because it's even more canceled than race realism, by the way, which is lookism.
Yes.
But the moment you do all this, you realize that everybody knows this. You know, if there's a bunch of dudes in the room, the moment a woman enters the room, the social energy changes. You feel a flood of emotionality you need to sort of, you know, you need to work with. The moment you see a different, you know, or if you're in a room, if you're at a bar, let's say you're single right now, and then a tall hot guy comes in, suddenly you're roofied from his face. You know, it's like nobody wants to talk about it, but genes are real, and I don't know why it's so controversial to say this, because I just don't want to lie to people, you know?
Yeah. Because there's beauty in the truth, and you value beauty, and that is why you have foregone so many financial opportunities to tell the truth. Are you familiar with these Jewish twin studies? There was a documentary that came out called Three Identical Strangers. You would go crazy for this. So this Jewish adoption agency engaged in these horrifically unethical studies where nobody had consented to these. In one case, they separated triplets only to Jewish families. They put one of the triplets in a poor family, one in a middle class family, one in a wealthy family, and then studied them. The triplets, of course, did not know that they were being studied. So this is the documentary Three Identical Strangers. They found each other because it was in New York. Two of them had gone to the same community college, ran into each other, realized they were identical. And then a different person told them, there is a third one of you. So they met, and their lives were so similar, despite being raised in disparate socioeconomic backgrounds. They had just converged and basically were all living the same life. And they were so traumatized by the separation that they discovered in their 20s. One of them committed suicide. It was just a disaster. And there are many, many, many sets of twins that have been part of the larger umbrella of these experiments. And the data is not yet released. But you would be so interested in the outcome, because I think that what we learn from genetics is that you can screw up your kids, but there's not much you can do to make them better. And that is really difficult for people to swallow. And I understand why. I mean, we want to believe that we can navigate the world and the fallen world through our own choices, and that free will is very important to the outcome of our lives. But I also think that there's great value in relinquishing that control to some degree.
Yes, and to add on to that, it also accentuates your free will. If you have this information, at least you can say, okay, if I'm going to create offspring, I need to. Oh shit! You need to be more Asian. I need to select based on those indicators that will make my child's life easier. Frankly speaking, I mean, yeah, these identical twin separated at birth studies, it sort of proves it's got to be like at minimum 80-20.
Yeah.
You know, like this is where we're at. I mean, it's you know, we just had the Olympics culminating here, right? And it's funny because in the physical domain, we know that all the hip explosive sports, you know, like running, the blacks are gonna get this.
Oh yeah, totally.
You look at all the upper body, it's those giant fucking white guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at everything like precise and technical, ping pong, wrestling, gymnastics, whatever, it's all Asians. Shooting, you know, what does that tell you? It tells you like perhaps that also permeates to other facilities. It's not just about athleticism. Maybe that also applies to aesthetic prowess, IQ, being technically proficient, and
but people won't go there. It's the obvious next step.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why people don't go there is because, like the elephant in the room for at least Western societies, it's, you know, black crime. That's what it boils down to. But you know, this is old news now. So, what are we gonna do to expel these Jews?
really, what are we gonna do?
It's funny because like it's I have to be like maybe I shouldn't have said that, because I gotta be careful about what I say so much now, because I have been getting like a lot of like um, death threats and this kind of stuff lately.
Dude, who cares? You're in it. You're in it. At this point, you just need to just balls to the wall, accelerate into the JQ. It's the only
I've
thing.
had some weird things though. Like I've had people show up to my family's home. That does bother me. I had a dead bird sent to me. It gets weird sometimes, you know. And I'm like,
Dude, that's way worse than the stuff that's happened to me. Why do people hate you so much?
I don't know. I think
Oh
there's,
man.
I don't know. I don't know.
You think that you would have some kind of minority status protection. Asians don't get any of that. It's such bullshit.
Well, they also don't, you know, because another thing is that, look, frankly speaking, I love white people. You know, it's funny because like I can say I love black people and they'll go, yeah, but then if like I love white people, everyone's like, how dare you? You're a cult, you're suicidal, or whatever they say. They're just like you know, I actually love all people, but if I specifically say I love white people, for some reason that's an admonishable offense. And I'm just saying this from the perspective that, frankly, every time I've moved, I've just told the real estate agent, the broker, like I want to be around Asians and whites.
Yeah.
Straight up. And you
Yep.
know, I think another thing that we all would honestly say, frankly, amongst our family.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I just say it. And I've come to see that like a lot of people are going to start to realize this as well. Once they fully demonize, well, they're pretty much fully demonized already, but once they obliterate the white man, especially Christian identity, you're starting to see this, you know, appear in certain areas. But basically, Asian men are next, 100%. Because by every metric, makes white privilege, Asian men apply even more. We, on average, make way more money. We're way more educated. We're not imprisoned as much. Our families stay together. And like you start to see this at the higher levels of university. Anytime they say white acceptance rates are deleterious, it's not fair. You know, we need to bring in the DEI, this sort of cadence. The next thing that always happens are Asian men are basically penalized every single
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
From a perspective of self-preservation, this is why the Japanese also liked, you know, they sided with the Germans because they understood this, that the moment white people are down, the Tengu are after us next. So there's also an element of self-preservation, if I'm just being frank with you all. But we also look at, many East Asian people do look at white people as like, it's so funny because we're from like totally separate parts of the world, but because of the cold climates, therefore, it requires delayed gratification and thinking.
And planning. Yeah.
It's 100%. So we grew up in, you know, we're both adapted to cold climates, but because of the locality, we're always responding to different environments. I often feel like white people are extroverted East Asians and East Asians are introverted white people. I often feel that way. You know, it's really funny, but there is an alliance there, and the alliance is saying you guys have to maintain your racial consciousness, and you need to put yourself first. You know.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Which doesn't mean that our communities are interchangeable or anything like that. But I do think that it's important, at least in America, to maintain this alliance. And also what you said about Muslims earlier, it is a disparate community that is not going to integrate in any way, shape, or form. But I think that it's a bit of a Trojan horse in that it's not the main problem. It's not the biggest problem.
It is not. You know, there's this meme of like Salahuddin and King Baldwin coming together, right? That, you know, there's this mutual respect meme of Muslims and Christians coming together. And look, I like that idea. And I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with this because I've spoken to a lot of my peers in this culture war as well. And I have a hard time like totally saying, yeah, you know, like let's embrace the Muslims totally, because they also do have a track record of backstabbing Christian countries when they have the opportunity.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Yeah, literally. And also, they have no consanguinity. There's a big inbreeding problem in their IQ. The median IQ for most Muslim people actually is 82.
Ooh, that is terrible. Right, right. And then 30% of Pakistani marriages are cousin marriages too.
Yes.
They're dysgenic goat fuckers. I mean, that's just the way it is. Yeah. So I don't want to have like a serious alliance with them, but they have a higher regard for Jesus than Jews do.
Yes, they do, but I will say at the same time, I am getting tired of these know-it-all Muslim scholars sort of patronizing Christians by talking down to them, saying, "Yeah, we respect Christ, we get that, but ultimately, you know, Allah, blah blah blah." Like I get a lot of that as well. And again, I'm trying to like navigate this because yes, I mean, they can be an ally in this regard, but I just need Christians to understand that they can be an ally temporarily, but
Yes.
understand that they're still not going to be able to integrate afterwards. They're not
Right.
assimilatable culture, you know?
But they don't want to assimilate. So I don't think that they're going to be subversive. This is why I can deal with Muslims, because we don't get this element of subversion from them. They're like, we're going to come into your country, we're going to rape your women, and we're going to try to dominate you. I'm like, thanks for telling me that. I appreciate that. They're not going to slide under the radar, you know?
Honest, what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to go back to this this conversation about Black people because I did have a few questions about this. I heard you say this hilarious thing about Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell, that you feel for them, and I've thought this before. Like these really smart Black people, Candace Owens, and it must be like, this is what you said, being in a room full of retards their whole life, and it must be so frustrating to look at their community and be like, come on guys, and still have that racial consciousness, but be 2 standard deviations above their median IQ. How much of this do you think, of this victim complex that most Black people have, which Asians lack, how much of this do you think is genetic and unavoidable within the Black community?
Well, unfortunately, again, I hate to be the Black pill guy, but it is entirely genetic. A person's like stance on being a victim is correlated to how low their IQ is. You know, and this is a uncomfortable truth. The reason why they have a million excuses whilst they're literally like knocking out white women and like celebrating it, and they call themselves victims at the same time, is because they literally cannot have the conceit to see the hypocrisy. It's that bad, and people don't
Right.
understand. And it is sad because you know, they got to be out of place in that regard. And what is the solution to this? You know,
Yes. What is the solution? The average American Black is 20% white. So what are we going to do? I mean, we brought them here. It's not like we can expel them to Africa. That's not really an option here. We have to integrate to some degree. People are like, well, we should send them back to Africa. Totally unrealistic. We're gonna have to find a way to live with these people.
I don't see us getting unintegrated.
Yeah.
I mean, at least to a degree, I just don't see it happening. But I will say that like an uncomfortable conversation, and a lot of people. Yeah. Well, anyways, I mean, the thing is that if you right now Google "happy white woman," you just see these Black guys with a white woman, and the reason why is because this is a part of the Kalergi clan. You know,
Yes.
just this week you saw Bill Maher saying, "Oh, I love the fact that London is replacing all of their cultural impediments with kebab stands," and then Ben Stiller, like a couple days before that, said,
I wish I were a Black woman. Was that what he said?
he said that every white man and every Jewish man, lumping them together by the way, says wishing they were a Black guy. And the reason why they're saying this is because there is this machine gun effort aimed at white women to want to fornicate with Black men. There's a big agenda, and it's an uncomfortable truth. But if you look at like the percentage of white women who are interracially marrying now and race mixing, it's around 18%, I believe. And if you look at like Japan in comparison, it's 3.8%.
Yeah.
And
It's 3.8%.
It's very low.
Well, that doesn't sound low for the Japanese. I mean, what are we talking here? Do they count intermarriage with Koreans?
They're probably excluding that, but yeah. I guess I'm talking about non-East Asians. You know,
that's too high.
Yeah. Well, my point is that the reason why is because all of this is gene wars. Mm-hmm. All of this is about maintaining. You know, this is a kind of, I don't want to get too Jungian with you all, but races have a collective psyche.
It's better than getting Freudian.
Absolutely. Races have their own collective psyche, and you know, white people, they're just trying to blur, you know, make you guys as gray, and it's a branding of America. Mm-hmm. You know, I will say, there are going to be, you cannot stop it. It's going to obviously happen, to a degree. But my point is, having this conversation is so volatile today because we know who's in charge here.
Yeah. Well, most people don't.
Yeah. Well, your audience does. So.
Yeah, that's true. I have cultivated a really interesting audience because I also do a podcast with a constitutional conservative, Matt Christensen, and so I have a lot of audience members that come over from my podcast to my interviews, and they're like, "No, like I can't. I'm out on this one." But people like us, I wasn't born like this. I was made. I didn't want to accept I just put out one YouTube video, and then I had been catapulted into this race realist trajectory. I did not start off like this, and I doubt you did either. Things happen in life where if you value truth, you just have to accept these things and then move on from a place of having more information, no matter how painful it is. But denialism, it is strong. It is potent.
You have to go fix you.
Mhm. Yep.
There is to it, and when they say the truth will set you free, they're not saying you're going to be like in sunshines and rainbows and gallivanting around in happiness, but they are saying that it will give you clarity.
Yes.
The point is that it gives you perspective and clarity. The goal is to not have glasses on with fog on them. It's just
right.
to see the world as it is, and it just doesn't help anyone to lie to them. And this applies to every domain, whether it's the fucking manosphere and the red pill, whether it's race realism and how that fits into politics and controlling demographics. You need to know the truth because that's the only way we can establish some sort of peace, right, for our kids. So
that's true, and justice.
Yes.
Man, on that note, what a great interview. Thank you so much for joining me. If you just want to, I have all the links below if you want to tell people where they can find you. It's very important you follow his Twitter.
I appreciate it. And again, guys, my thing is like people are often like, what are you? Are you like a Christian content guy? Are you all about your art? Or you're like a JQ? I'm like, I'm just being transparent and being honest about where I'm going on my journey. And I think that's also why my audience likes me, because I think people reward authenticity, and I'm just real. And as of now, I'm like this weird like black pill naturalist, Christendom expanding, JQ-ish guy. But who knows? I might end up being in some mountain as a hippie later. Who knows?
Yeah, really. Maybe you'll ascend to a higher form later. we'll see.
Here.
That was my guest, Arthur Kwon Lee. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Oh, how fun. That was such